Welcome back to our live taping of Intersection at the Orlando Public Library's Melrose Center. February marks 1 year since the suicide of Transportation Security Administration Officer Robert Henry at Orlando International Airport, and in the aftermath of Rob Henry's death, WMFE investigated allegations of abuse and retaliation at TSA, and also the changes made by TSA in the 12 months since to improve workplace culture and work to prevent suicide. And for this part of the show, we're going to hear from a mental health expert and friends and colleagues of Rob. We did reach out to lawmakers to join us for this discussion. Congressman Darren Soto was unable to make the event, but WMFE's Danielle Pryor and Isaac Babcock did speak to him at his office, and here's what he had to say.
What would you like to see, ideally speaking, when it comes to suicide prevention, identifying but also making sure people are getting help and support that they need?
So there needs to be an environment of trust so that people feel comfortable going forward. And some of that, it's constant maintenance because every airport has different managers that create a different environment. So the oversight power is critical. You can't just fix it with a law, and you can't just fix it with funding. There is an oversight element that Congress has to provide and to advocate, really, along with AFGE and some the local union that represents most of them and others. So there's an advocacy of it. But then, yes, there's a funding part of it, and then there's direction that we could put either in law or by just having hearings like Homeland Security had a little bit after the time of Robert Henry's death. And we saw a lot of stress on families around the airport because of the shutdown, from air traffic controllers to professional safety specialists to our TSA and others. Those were real stories, real families being affected, and most Americans heard their cries, and eventually the American people rose up to have that shutdown stop. But I'll be following up over the next couple of weeks to see the progress of the functions at the management level of suicide prevention, and I'll also be working with the individual officers and their union to make sure that it continues to be up to snuff. But we don't need to have other shutdowns because that contributes to it. When you're working in a high pressure situation, long hours, and you're not getting paid, it's nearly impossible for people to keep strong mental health.
So Darren Soto there. Joining me on stage, I want to introduce our guest for the second panel. We're joined by Stanley Tuchalski. He's a TSO at Orlando International Airport. He was a supervisor and colleague of Rob at Dulles International Airport and MCO as well. Stan, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Also joined by Brenda Scherer. She's a friend and former colleague of Rob. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.
Also with us is Ryan Gallick. He's with the Mental Hygiene Project. Ryan, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me.
And Joey Donadio, former TSO at Orlando International Airport. He alleges he was fired for having generalized anxiety disorder. He's currently a firefighter in Marion County. Joey, thank you as well for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Brenda, we kind of got a sense in the previous panel from our reporters here of sort of the story that you had to tell about Rob. I want to ask you, in the last 12 months, what do you think about the progress that has or has not been made to fix some of the problems that contributed to Rob's death?
Well, since I'm not really at the airport anymore, I can only go by what people are telling me. Good and bad. Some things are changing. Some things may be reverting back, unfortunately. Letting go of certain people, or technically moving them to other locations, has picked up a little bit there, made people feel a little bit better about their job. They've tended to band together, but anytime you have that many people picking on other people, there's always going to be one that they have to choose. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that stopping until you get rid of the ones that are doing it.
Do you feel like the picture we've seen in the media, and for many folks, obviously this is the first glimpse we're getting of Rob Henry, does that kind of match the Rob you knew?
Oh, Robert was a doll. He was a big teddy bear. He was very quiet. You had to approach him first. He would have your back no matter what was going on. If there was something going on in your life, he was there for you, at work or outside of work. He didn't care. He would do his job. He loved his job. He tried to do it to the best of his ability every single day. And seeing him hopefully portrayed as the nicest man in the world is good. Seeing that they denied some of the allegations about the bullying and stuff hurts, because when you personally witness it, it's sort of calling me a liar too.
Given what you know, and to your point, you're no longer at the airport,
Right.
so you're sort of getting a little bit of secondhand information, but do you kind of feel like enough has been done to prevent somebody else who may be going through the same kind of stress and strife as Rob doing what he did?
No, that's a quick and easy answer. I retired officially October 31st, 2000, what year was it? 18, thank you, I lost an entire year there. And just so everybody knows, the day before Robert did what he did, I reapplied to TSA. I put the paperwork to go back in on February 1st so I could go back there and help him out, because I knew he was coming home every day, and I'd see him every day when he came to pick his mail up, and he'd pet all the cats, pet the dog, go talk to my sons, and he just said that this happened. They put me over here. They moved me over there. They're writing me up for this. I'm like, Robert, I'm coming back. I can't see you go through this anymore. I said, I've got your back. Come to me. So I know that unless a drastic change is made at that airport with many of the higher ups, including management, it's not going to change. Someone has to get in there and just clean house.
What made you want to be a TSO in the first place?
Well, I started at MCO August 20th, 2002. I opened up the West Checkpoint, that's gates 1 through 59. I had graduated, I had left work at Lockheed and went back and got my degree, and I graduated August 4th, 2001. 9/11 hit, no one was hiring. So I applied to TSA. And when they opened up, I went in and I did all the training, and it was just a wonderful group of people. And we felt we were serving a purpose. We were trying to protect everybody. We were behind the 8 ball because we were learning daily, and the machines were not as good as they are now, just so you know. But everyone banded together, and we worked hard, and it was a family. And I just wanted to do my part, and I know that's what Rob felt too. He wanted to do his part.
And kind of to your point and what we alluded to in the first panel, this is an agency that kind of evolved out of 9/11, so it was put together
Correct.
pretty quickly for
Yes.
a federal agency.
Yeah, absolutely. We were on the job training is how we learned our jobs.
Of course, Orlando is now the busiest airport in Florida. It's getting busier by the day, but back
Yes.
when you started, it wouldn't have been quite as hectic, I imagine.
It was still bad because there was there was a lot of passengers that had never gone through a TSA checkpoint before. And now they're trying to learn new things. And remember, in the beginning, shoes were left on, and the liquids were okay. But there was a lot more bag checks that way, and a lot more people beeping walking through that metal detector. But there was a lot more that we have streamlined the process down, so it's actually much quicker now. So the lines were long because it took longer to do the job. So now it's just get them in and out, get them in and out.
Right. Stan Tuchalski, kind of thinking about what we heard from Congressman Soto just a moment or two ago, he's talking about some of the things he's trying to put through at the legislative level and obviously other lawmakers too. What kind of progress do you see having been made, and especially when you think about things like suicide prevention and the like? Like what's going on there, and is it moving fast enough?
Well, I don't know if it's moving fast enough. Obviously, the situation raised it into the national awareness, and TSA had to respond. And they had to respond with realizing that they had nothing in place that was significant and substantial enough to permeate through the workplace. So, there is the national initiative that they have that we are slowly seeing roll out, but where it is exactly, I'm not sure at this point. There is a concern locally, listening to Mr. Babcock talk about going up to where Rob jumped from and everything. For the longest time, any one of us officers, when we came to work, when we walked through that atrium, you just automatically look up and you recalled. And there was not a week that would go by where somebody would say, it took somebody to take their life to make things start to even begin to be looked at, not even change, but begin to be looked at as serious. Because for years, people at MCO in the TSA workforce voiced their concerns, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. As we approached the year mark, I had a lot of officers, coworkers ask me, well, what are we doing? You know, WMFE's having this thing, and what are we doing? And I said, I haven't heard. So I started a dialogue through email with our acting federal security director.
We might just pause and let the message run. So let me just ask you that question again.
Okay.
You were saying, Stan, that you're kind of reflecting on the 1 year mark and thinking, what are we doing as TSA agents?
Yeah, because people were saying, you know, what are we going to do? And I tend to be one of those people that people say that kind of stuff. What are we going to do about this, Stan? What are we going to do? So I wrote an email to our acting federal security director and our acting assistant federal security director, Mr. Pete Garcia and Gregory Hocko. And I said, you know, as we approach, is there something that can be done? And I gave a couple different thoughts, because traditionally when someone passes in the workforce, we have mourning bands that we can wear on our official shields for a duration of time. Within hours, much to his credit, Mr. Garcia called me personally and you know, thanked me for my input and asked me to think more, and he gave me what he thought about. And so I followed that up with an email and everything. And today he called me again to tell me that they transformed the thought of wearing mourning bands, because that was what we thought we were going to do. And they've ordered ribbons that the workforce will be provided. And so instead of being more mourning, it'd be more commemorative, but also with a whole focus of local suicide awareness and prevention. So signage has gone up. He talked about presentations that he's developed to be at briefings and small group discussions, probably like tabletop discussions and signs of awareness and everything. So those are glimmers of hope, but you know, much more can be done and much more support. But the sad thing is Mr. Garcia will no longer be with us after the end of March, because his acting temporary being there is going to end, and who knows what the future holds.
Has that been a good change, having that change of leadership at the top?
Mr. Garcia and Mr. Hocko have been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal compared to former FSDs and AFSDs. Unfortunately, we have management that's been there a long time that still likes to get rogue.
Did you say go rogue?
They go rogue.
Right.
Yeah.
Joey, let me bring you into this conversation. How did you know Rob Henry? How did you know Rob Henry?
I met Rob Henry when I was working in the training department at MCO. He was overnight shift, and at times I would work late. They would come in. What time do you guys come in? You sometimes come in early. Crazy hours.
6 o'clock.
And and I'd sometimes see him when I came in the morning. He had to do a few tests I had to help him with, some practical skills, just training related stuff. He seemed like a great guy. He really was. He was very standoffish, but he was a big teddy bear. He really was, and he was very reserved though.
How long did you spend at TSA?
I started LaGuardia in 2002 in the beginning, and then I came on to Orlando in 2005 or 4. I think it was
Okay.
2004 or 5. And then I was officially removed January of 2015.
And what drew you to TSA initially?
Initially, well, I had an option. Initially, I was supposed to go to the Port Authority Police Department up in New York. Unfortunately, Captain Kathy Mazza perished when the towers fell. She ran the academy there, so that was my ace in the hole. That opportunity went. I was looking into NYPD, FDNY, and then this new government agency started, and looked into it, and I said, hey, you know, it looks like a good opportunity.
From what Brenda was describing, her kind of first impressions of the cadre she came into Orlando with, it sounded like it was pretty close-knit. Was that similar experience to what you had? Like, did you feel there was a real sense of kind of camaraderie when you started working at TSA?
It was a little different at LaGuardia. It was a lot of former NYPD.
Yeah, we'll let that play.
Okay. It was a lot of former NYPD detectives and high-ups. So it was structured, you know, like a law enforcement, you know, outfit. You know, they ran the ship that way.
Now, you've shared in the course of Abe and Danielle's reporting over the last 12 months or so, you've kind of shared some of the issues that you had with anxiety and kind of working through those. It sounds like being a TSO is a pretty high-stress job. What's it like trying to do that job and be dealing with these other issues too?
Well, I mean, I had a different experience than Rob did. I don't take well to bullying, and I address it. He kept it inside, which is not good. See, that's my problem sometimes. I don't know how to zip it. But my situation was, you know, I had been denied about, and this is no exaggeration, 37 promotions within just a couple years, you know, and it was, I was just getting tossed around on detail assignments. I was being sent to school, rubbing elbows with fire chiefs, you know, designing exercises, tactical response plans, but I was never good enough for the position. Until once I started addressing these situations, that's when things started getting a little hot for me. And that's when I really started feeling the heat.
Ryan Gallick, let me bring you into this conversation now. You were a firefighter, and now you're working in the kind of field of sort of workplace culture, trying to improve that culture and the like. Just sort of talk about what you do in terms of mental health and making people aware of the importance of good mental health for jobs like this or other jobs too.
Yeah, so I served in Central Florida for 18 years as a firefighter paramedic. And, you know, you can imagine during that time I had responded to a lot of psychiatric calls, whether that be anxiety, depression, compassion fatigue, burnout, and all the way up to suicide. And, you know, suicide is now the leading cause of death among first responders. In 2019, we lost 356 firefighters, EMTs, and law enforcement officers. So I said, I think I have an idea. I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called Silent Mayday. Think about that, the Silent Mayday. 129 people die every single day to suicide. Worldwide, 800,000 people die every year to suicide. I said, you know, I can't be responsive to this. I'm going to get ahead of it. And so I decided at 36 years old I was going to take a leap of faith. I was going to do an early retirement and launch a consulting company. Having said that, I have Ryan Gallick and Associates, where I work with first responding agencies, police, fire, and EMS, building safety programs. Obviously, a pillar of that is what I call mental hygiene. Mental hygiene, it's hygiene. Let's be proactive in this. Then I co-founded the Mental Hygiene Project, where we help organizations lead for positive mental health, create organizational resiliency, the ability to be able to withstand, recover, and grow from the challenges of life. And it really is making an impact. And so many people don't even know how to find a clinician. I mean, let's look at these TSA workers, just in Orlando. Last year, there was 96 guns found at the Orlando International Airport. 96. That's one about every 4 days. They have a high-risk job. They're scanning, correct me if I'm wrong, at minimum 1,500 passengers an hour per checkpoint. Easy. That's a lot of passengers. And then we get upset when they take our bottle of water. I mean, they have such a high-risk job, and they are exposed to so many people. I want to know what kind of organizational resiliency processes and systems do they have in place. Now, they do have critical incident stress management. I don't want to jump ahead. That may be a question that you have. But that may be one of the root causes. And I'm not poking fun at CISM, critical incident stress management. I mean, it's back from the 70s and the 80s. And some organizations still use that critical incident stress management process. But it's a process, and it's typically for critical incidences. Today, what really works is peer-to-peer support, where we are all the gatekeeper of mental hygiene and normalizing the conversation around mental health.
Just thinking about TSA, it's a big agency, obviously, and if you do need to take an agency like this and really change the way that culture works, is there some other change that you've seen in some kind of comparable organization or company that TSA could be looking to and say, yeah, we should follow this model?
Yeah, I mean, they have 50,000 TSA agents. That's a lot. And you have got to develop a training curriculum that creates communication, coordination, and consistency. You have to create psychological empowerment. And really, to be able to be a resilient workforce, you need to be able to train these employees, whether it be video-based. I mean, with that amount of people, it's going to be really hard to have that in-person training all the time. However, create a video-based training at minimum, teaching about more on mental health, normalizing the conversation around mental health, and really ensuring that everyone understands what do we do when we see the signs and symptoms of that temporary challenge of life. But here's a really important thing. My dear friend and mentor, Dwight Bain, he's the licensed mental health counselor here in Central Florida. He says, you will always miss what you are not trained to see. And some of us do not understand the signs and the symptoms of compassion fatigue, burnout. Burnout is now, according to the World Health Organization, a legitimate diagnosis. And it's caused by workplace stress.
Stan, if I could bring you back into this conversation, we heard some in the first panel about the union and what that may or may not be doing to address issues at TSA, particularly in Orlando. How do you feel that's going? Do you feel like you have kind of a good conversation going there and that they have your back?
Actually, yes. Sad to say, as a fledgling organization and agency, we've always been the stepchild of the government in many ways. So all these, what's going on in the House with their bill and everything, it's all positive, and hopefully it'll go through because the agency still has to grow. The same applies to our union. We were a non-union workforce for a long time, not allowed to even be unionized. Then we got a union, and truth be told, we had union representatives and people that were not worth their weight for any talk that they gave. But it has gotten dramatically better. It may not be perfect, and there are issues now, but with the turnover and everything, but I know for a matter of fact, yesterday, I had to contact the union president, and we spent a lot of time on the fact that I had a coworker tell me that they've been put on the Green Mile.
Now, what is the Green Mile?
Well, the Green Mile was what we called, because of the green Orlando carpet, MCO has their own MCO designed carpet, which they replace every 5 years for the last 30 years, the same design. But people would be assigned to the east checkpoint out front to just do minimal task, and they would walk back and forth. And so it got termed the Green Mile. It was, and anybody who ended out front there, we knew they were in trouble, targeted, there was an issue, they may be on their way out, this or that. So I had a young lady tell me that she ended up on the Green Mile. Well, we were promised that the Green Mile was gone, that nobody would ever be on the Green Mile again. So whether there was a misunderstanding, a misterminology or whatever, but I know that Deb spent, our union president, spent a lot of time yesterday doing fact-finding, investigating everything, because it sounds like a manager went rogue. And it's happened more than once. I have a formal mediation tomorrow for an EEO complaint for something that happened on November 17th when I picked up a shift for somebody. And I was told that the shoes that I was wearing for 11 months were non-uniform compliant.
So that's something you get pulled up for, shoes?
Apparently, 4 hours out of an 8-hour shift, I was spoken to several times about the shoes that I had been wearing for 11 months in front of all of these same characters without it being an issue, and not told exactly why they were not compliant.
It could be because you spoke up, right, Stan?
Could be.
Could be, right.
I want to just bring the conversation back to Rob for a moment. And Brenda, let me turn to you. What is Rob's legacy as far as you're concerned?
I'm trying here, guys. Robert had the courage to do what none of us could do. He went public. And it hurts. But I don't know if anyone could have stopped him that morning. He knew what he had to do. As he said, he had lived his life. But he hoped that the managers that did this would have to suffer and at least be investigated and not be pushed aside and let it go under the carpet again. He was a kind and compassionate person that did not deserve this. I'm okay. He was a big man, but he was the most kind-hearted person in the universe, and they took advantage of him. They would move him places, they would put him places where he was no way going to be successful. And it wasn't just the managers or the supervisors or the leads, it was fellow TSOs. His fellow officers did the exact same thing to him every week. Someone would go report him, and that's what they do there. They pick on somebody, whoever it is that they're after, and then to make themselves look better, they report them. They go to the manager that they're buddies with, and they tell him, well, I saw him have his phone out, but he could be standing next to 5 other people with their phones out, and he would be the one written up, no one else. He never admitted to not doing anything wrong because we were all humans. Human beings make mistakes, and we were not treated as human beings there. We had to follow the rules, don't argue with the rules. And the rules changed constantly. It depended on what manager was in charge to what the rule was that day. There were a number of complaints against Robert that were unsubstantiated, but they were still put down against him. And he would be called out. Not all of them were written down. You could probably check his file and you would find half the stuff not even there, because they would personally pull you aside and sometimes do it in front of everybody else in the checkpoint just to embarrass you that you did this wrong, or we think you might possibly do this wrong. How is that even a problem? You might like look the wrong way at one time, but they would berate you in front of other people, but nothing would be written down. So you would physically and emotionally have to put up with this issue, go about your job protecting the flying public, and do it to the best of your ability, knowing that they're out to get you. And that, to me, for the rest of the TSA people there, that's what I know the family wants. They don't want anything from anybody at TSA. They want it to get better there. They don't want people to have to go to work every day and worry what's going to happen to them that day.
Joey, let me kind of put that question to you in a slightly different form. What do you want to see happen, say, next 12 months or even 24 months out from here, sort of thinking about changes that obviously still need to happen at TSA?
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to see the Title V rights go through. That's essential if you're going to change anything. Under the way things are right now, I don't know what the suicide prevention entails. I did read up on it a little bit. It was a training program and so on and so forth. However, anxiety currently right now is a disqualifying factor and will get you terminated. So how effective is a suicide prevention program? Also, who are going to be the ones that are going to be looking for these indicators? Is it going to be management, bullies? You know, is it just going to give a broader discretion to the problem? Is it going to create more of a problem? You know, we're really not fixing anything here. You know, it's pretty sad. And what breaks my heart is I know that a lot of people had a lot of hope with this investigation. Yeah. A lot of people were interviewed and with the investigation into Roberts. And when it came back as no bullying, that's it. All the wind was taken out of the sails. I think that people had hope. This was the most hope they had for change, and it fizzled out.
Stan, do you still hold out some hope that things will change for the better?
I think a lot is going to be determined locally as to who headquarters decides the next FSD will be. We have heard rumor as to who the new AFSD is going to be, but sketchy details, and it's rumor at this point. Maybe credible rumor, but it's going to be a change, but it also seems to be connected to some of the people of the past, and I don't want to go there because it's one of those moments where I got to protect myself.
Ryan, just in the last kind of few minutes or so here, sounds like there's still quite a bit of work to do for folks in TSA. How do you see this playing out?
I definitely think it goes way beyond TSA. The American Psychiatric Association states 1 in 5 people will be diagnosed with some form of mental illness in their lifetime. That is more than diabetes, that is more than cancer, and heart disease combined. That is huge. And if TSA doesn't think that they can get a workforce that does not have some form of mental injury, they're wrong, they're in denial. So I think that they need to create psychological empowerment, they need to create resiliency techniques and empower people to normalize the conversation around mental health. And how do you do that? Well, it begins by communicating and having safeguards and, you know, changing the way that we speak. You know, you'll never hear me say, I'll say it here one time, PTSD. I choose to say PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. Let's look at it as an injury and show post-traumatic growth after post-traumatic stress. And that's where healthy coping mechanisms, the adaptability measures, and healthy resiliency, mindfulness techniques can get you out of that red, orange, and yellow zone and back into the green zone of being healthy. But let me also say this. We all have skin in the game when we talk about mental health. However, we don't all have mental hygiene practices. That's the problem, in my opinion.
I want to thank the panel, but I do want to also just leave a space for a question or two. If anyone has questions, we do have the mic over there if you want to step up and ask our panel in the final minutes or so here.
Hi, my name is Shannon Taylor. I'm a professor in UCF's College of Business, where I study workplace mistreatment. It strikes me that TSA's solution to roll out suicide prevention training is addressing the symptom rather than the cause of the problem, which seems to be quite clear from the panel, that it's workplace bullying and abuse. So I'm curious to know your thoughts about TSA's efforts to provide not just mental health training or suicide prevention training, but workplace bullying training, whether that might be feasible and where that might go.
What initially comes to mind is after the Robert incident and in those early days being at a briefing where we were sternly told you are not to disrespect anybody else, and if you are caught doing it, you will be disciplined. And I was like, I think I was just bullied when I was being told not to bully. So as I said, the prevention program or awareness program, we haven't seen the components yet. It's still in its birthing and rollout. I know there is some kind of cognitive testing or training that's going on at MCO right now that might be like a preliminary thing that we're a pilot program, but I haven't gone to that yet. It scared a lot of people at first when they were told that they were going and they had to do a preliminary test for their cognitive skills and then go through a class and then take another test, and everybody's like, what is Big Brother keeping about me cognitively now? Is this going to be something that's going to threaten my job? Is there going to be a record of my ability to handle things? Is this going to be a way to keep me from having my job, or is this a way to prepare people coming into the job? But there was a former FSD at MCO that one of his 3 tenets was people first, mission always, communication critical. One thing, if you've been part of TSA, communication is never done in an effective and out there way. I mean, it's always hearsay. You hear a piece there, see a piece there, pick up it in the break room, something's in the news, you find out from the news first.
Ryan, it sounds like communication is probably part of the piece there.
It's a huge thing, and thank you so much for your question. I think it's a wonderful question. That's why I partnered up with my co-founder, Michael Stahl, 30 years of expert as a leadership expert, and it's really looking at culture. The leaders are either defining it or they're defaulting to it, and there's a lot of complacency in these organizations. And what are the ABCs of complacency? This is the way we've always done it. This is the way that it is. Suck it up, buttercup attitude. ABCs, it's an attitude that leads to a behavior that leads to a culture. And it's creating a toxic culture where people cannot thrive and perform their best work. And what kind of financial and human impacts are being put, in front of the organization by that? So it's much more than suicide prevention. You're absolutely right.
Well, thank you so much for your question. Anybody else? Okay, well, I want to thank Jim Myers and the staff at the Orlando Public Library's Melrose Center. Thank you also to WMFE's Mac Dula, Juan Gualda, Jenny Babcock, Christine Hetzel, Vieca Kleinova, Steve Yasko, and our CEO, Erica Pulley-Hayes. And thank you all for coming.